For years, we heard what they wanted to say. Now it's the McCann family's silence that screams the truth no one was ready to hear. Imagine the ocean at dusk. The water seems calm, almost still. The orange sky reflects a deceptive peace, because just below the surface, there's something immense, silent, cold, and submerged. Now swap that sea for a crowd. Cameras, journalists, flashes firing nonstop. Everyone trying to extract an answer. At the center of the storm, the McCann couple. Serious faces, eyes downcast, calculated words. We just want our daughter back. But between each public statement, there was what wasn't said. The whole world heard what they said. But what didn't they say? For years, that frozen image, the distraught parents searching for their daughter, became the symbol of the case. But frozen images hide movement. And sometimes what seems static is just what was made visible. Because behind that scene the whole world watched, there was a space no one dared to fill. A space made of pauses, contradictions, sealed documents, averted glances. You've heard this story, probably more than once, but not like this. Because today we're not going to repeat what's already been said. We're going to try to hear what was left in silence. The disappearance of a child is, in itself, a collective wound. But in Madeleine's case, what hurts most might not be just her absence, it's the echo of what was never clarified. Why have so many questions gone unanswered? Why were certain pieces of information never shared? And why was the family's silence, which should hurt, treated as something natural? The pain no one sees is the one no one wants to look at, because it's unsettling. It stirs what we prefer to call respect, but which sometimes is just fear of confronting an inconvenient truth. Today we're going to the depths, where the silence lives. And maybe in the darkness of what was never said, there's something that changes everything. If this has already stirred you, stay here, subscribe, because some truths only appear to those who still have the courage to listen. It was May 3rd, 2007, when Madeleine disappeared. An ordinary night at a resort in Portugal turned into global headlines. The McCann family was on vacation. Dinner with friends a few meters from the room, periodic checks on the children, and then the void. At first, it was just desperation. The mother running, shouting her daughter's name in the hotel courtyard. The British press descending like an army. Cameras, flashes, rapid-fire questions. And the parents at the center of it all seemed frozen, rigid, with restrained words. The world embraced them. The image formed quickly. Devastated parents, victims of a cruel abduction, objects of global pity. Headlines spoke of pain, but also of prestige. Respected British doctors on vacation in a foreign country. Empathy came with a subtle shield. While the police tried to piece together the puzzle, the press helped cement the frame. They were innocent, untouchable, suffering, and no one questions the suffering. But even back then, questions started to form. Why such selectivity in what was shared? Why did everything seem filtered, polished, rehearsed? And why, while the world watched, did they always seem to know exactly what to say or what not to say? While other families in similar situations exposed every detail in an attempt to help, like Elizabeth Smart or John Benet Ramsey's parents, the McCanns kept a strange distance, an almost surgical control over their pain. And when pain seems scripted, something inside us starts to feel uneasy. But at that moment, the spotlight was too bright, and no one dared look at what might be beneath the water. Over time, the narrative solidified. Madeleine, the smiling girl in the photo, became a symbol, and her parents, the portrait of controlled grief. But what no one said out loud is that their grief was also uncomfortable, not because it was too great, but because it seemed too adjusted. That's when the first crack appeared, when the Portuguese police began to doubt the accounts, when inconsistencies in timelines emerged, when witnesses started vanishing from public reports, when the parents stopped cooperating with investigators and returned to the UK before many questions were asked. The surface still gleamed, but it began to tremble, because that silence, once seen as mourning, started to feel like a choice, deliberate, defensive. What if it wasn't just fragility? What if it was strategy? The press, instead of questioning, backed off. The British government intervened. Lawyers were hired. PR teams took charge. The case stopped being just a search for a child. It became an operation. And the silence, which had been unsettling for its absence, now began to unsettle for its volume. We can't comment at this time. We're focused on finding our daughter. Short sentences, cold, repeated, and over time they became a wall. That initial image, fragile, lost parents, was replaced by something stiffer, more armored. And the question that was once, "Where is Madeleine?" became, "Why so much protection around people who have nothing to hide?" What seemed like pain turned into defense. What seemed like silence turned into a shield. What if all this silence wasn't just absence? What if it was construction? Not every shiny surface is safe. Sometimes what's beneath is so heavy that everything above is kept there just to prevent it from sinking. And that's where the crack becomes an abyss. We'll get there. You remember that moment when everything seemed to have already been said? When the news repeated the case as if there were no more questions to ask? Well, that's exactly when something broke. A phrase slipped out. Small, almost nothing, but sharp like ice cracking. Someone within the investigation mentioned what should never have leaked. The contents of the mother's diary. It wasn't read to the public. It wasn't published. But the mere fact that we knew it existed and that it was kept secret for so long opened a fissure that can't be ignored. Why hide words written in moments of desperation? What's in intimate thoughts that, if revealed, could change everything? This isn't about judging those who suffered. It's about understanding that in a case like this, every detail matters. And when the protagonists themselves choose silence, that becomes part of the narrative. And this silence, unlike mourning, seemed rehearsed, measured, controlled. And then came another piece. The private security firm the family hired to conduct their own investigation. A group that wasn't obligated to share everything with the police, but had privileged access to clues, suspects, and accounts. Who investigates when the ones controlling the investigation are also the ones who need to be investigated? These are the moments when the ground gives way, when the trust holding up the surface starts to crack, and what was down there begins to emerge. Remember the iceberg image? The surface always seems calm, almost beautiful. But the part that scares is below, invisible, heavy. It was something like that when the parents, pressured by the police, decided to return to the UK, leaving the Portuguese investigation still open. The justification was emotional, exhaustion, strain, safety of their other children. But behind that, a dilemma grew that no one said out loud. Was their silence still pain, or had it become defense? This is the most uncomfortable part, because it forces us to step out of the comfortable place of unquestionable empathy. It forces us to ask, how far does the right to remain silent go when a child disappears? No one wants to believe that silence can hide something. We want to believe it protects, that it shelters. But when it's sustained by private contracts, formal refusals, rehearsed interviews, it stops feeling like a refuge and starts feeling like a shield. And then everything changes, because it stops being just about a grieving family and becomes about controlling a narrative. Some people vanished, witnesses who left the country, details that disappeared from the records, timelines that shifted in accounts, statements that seemed aligned before reaching the police station. And yet for years, much of the world kept its eyes fixed on the surface, on the perfect portrait of pain, because it was easier, because it was more palatable, because sometimes believing what was shown is less painful than questioning what was hidden. Until time passed. And like any poorly supported layer of ice, this one started to crack too. And this is where the twist happens. Not as an explosion, but as a whisper, a shift in tone, a feeling that maybe the secret isn't in what was said, but in what was carefully avoided. It's strange to think that the truth might be fully there, not in the words, but in the pauses between them, in the averted glances, in the questions no one dared to repeat. And that hurts, because it reveals that maybe we weren't just spectators. We might have been accomplices, unintentionally, just by accepting the silence as enough. Some things only those who felt it firsthand understand, like when the silence starts to scream, even if no one's listening. Now, tell me, what would you do if you knew something that could change everything, but the world wasn't ready to hear it? This is the point where we can't go back, because once the ice cracks, everything that was submerged starts to rise. And when that happens, there's no pretending you didn't see it. Let's open this next door together, because what comes now isn't just about the case. It's about what we choose to face and what we decide not to silence. Block 3, resolution and outcome. They told you the case was closed, that it was just another tragedy without a culprit. That time had already done what it could. But what if, in this case, time only froze what no one had the courage to melt? The iceberg that held this story wasn't made of facts. It was made of versions, and all the official versions floated on what was never questioned, on what couldn't be said, because saying it would require breaking the most comfortable pact of all, the one that accepts silence as truth. When the dust of the commotion settled, the gaps remain, one after another. The diary that never went public, the contract with the private firm that never accounted for itself, the refusal to return to Portugal, the witnesses who vanished, the dates that didn't match, the accounts that molded themselves to time, as if pain too had an editor. But the turning point wasn't a revealed document or a forgotten confession. It was realizing that everything holding this story together was what no one had the courage to ask. And when the questions return, even if late, the entire scene falls apart. The surface never told the whole story. It was just the reflection of what no one dared dive to see. And what stayed below was the most dangerous, the doubt that never died. The lack of answers was pushed aside, camouflaged with condolences, protected by headlines. And while the world was distracted by time passing, the silence remained intact. Now that we look below, the iceberg isn't just ice. It's concrete, cold, heavy, submerged, but not untouchable. When people start piecing together the fragments, not the ones handed to them, but the ones left behind, the picture changes. And what seemed like fragility starts to look like strategy. "Did you see this?" someone asks. "It was always there," another replies. And the reality hits like a dry punch to the chest. This is the cruelest turning point, because it shows that the danger isn't in what was said, it's in what was accepted without question. The image of the perfect family, the emotional statements, the political support, all of that formed the upper layer of the iceberg. It gleamed in the daylight, but what kept it standing, what sustained it, was the absence of confrontation. It was the fear of being cruel by asking the right question. It was the reluctance to seem insensitive by saying, "This doesn't add up." And then comes the doubt no one wanted to carry. Did the whole world help preserve a secret without realizing it? That's why at this moment, there's no going back. Because now that the eyes have adjusted to the dark, there's no pretending you didn't see. Maybe the truth never came because there was never room for it to exist. It didn't fit the narrative. It broke the pact of empathy that protects us from seeing beyond. But protect who? From what? From pain or from guilt? The truth, when it starts leaking through the cracks of silence, doesn't need to shout. It whispers. It lingers. It weighs. It brushes your shoulder as if to say, "Are you really going to keep pretending?" And I get it, because I too wanted to believe. I too saw that frozen image and felt compassion. I too was afraid to doubt, to seem inhumane, to be unfair to those who'd already lost so much. But the silence, it bothered me. It was too big, too consistent, too long. And when silence is so carefully constructed, maybe it's not mourning, maybe it's a shield. This isn't about accusing, it's about refusing to be complicit in omission. Because sometimes the loudest scream is the one no one had the courage to let out. And if it hasn't been said yet, maybe it's our turn to listen, to ask, to open what's been locked for so long. This isn't an ending. It's the moment the surface splits, and everything that was hidden finally starts to rise. Now that the truth has begun to emerge, the next question isn't about the case itself. It's about us. What do we do with what we've uncovered? Because some silences, once broken, refuse to be ignored again. And some questions, once they arise, never go back to sleep. They told you the truth was just a matter of time. But what if time was used precisely to freeze what no one wanted to face? Today, we didn't just talk about a case. We talked about the part of the story that was suffocated in silence. About those questions the whole world refuses to ask because the answer might be too uncomfortable. And if there's one thing this video showed, it's that what wasn't said also builds, also weighs, and sometimes carries more truth than any testimony. I didn't come here to accuse. I came to dust off what was swept under the collective pain. Because when we repeat ready-made versions without questioning, we become part of the wall that protects forgetting. And honestly, I too wanted to believe that frozen image. I too cried with the parents, wished it was just a nightmare, but deep down, something didn't fit. A silence. Too thick, too long, too directed. We can't pretend we didn't hear it anymore. And now that you've heard, what do you do with it? If this story hit you the way it hit me, I want to tell you that you're not alone. There are many people tired of accepting silence as truth. And maybe what we're doing here together is more than watching. Maybe it's lighting a torch, one at a time, in the dark, just to see what starts to appear. If this video left you with that knot in your chest that won't go away, watch the next one. It will touch exactly where the silence began, where no one dared to tread. And if you feel you need to keep walking this dark road with someone, subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't close our eyes. We listen to what no one had the courage to say. Now, I want to know what this stirred in you. Write in the comments. I'll read every single one. Leave your perspective there. It can be just a line, but let it come from truth. And if this story spoke to something inside you, if you believe silences can't be treated as endings, the super chat is your way of saying, I light the torch. Because those who leave that mark here aren't just spectators. They're someone who doesn't accept that certain stories stay hidden forever. It's a symbolic gesture, a sign that you heard and chose not to stay silent. Broken silence, living truth. Now we move forward, because the next story might be even harder to hear, but necessary. And I'll be there, waiting for you.